Welcome to Beyond HR, the podcast for people-first leaders who know that HR is about more than checklists and compliance. I'm Paige, your co-host, and we will explore the real challenges shaping today's workplaces. From burnout and belonging to strategy and storytelling, we're bringing you honest conversations, practical insights, and a fresh take on what it means to lead with heart in the world of work. Before we dive into our episode, here's a quick word from our launch sponsor.
If you're feeling stretched thin, juggling big changes, emotional labor, and communication breakdowns, you're not alone. Hi everyone, I'm Dan Kaplan, founder of Bring Disc to Life, an online community for aspiring leaders and HR professionals. We give you the strategies, tools, and encouragement to communicate in ways that increase your influence while lowering your stress. Using DISC, the 5 behaviors, and mindfulness, you'll learn to stay grounded, read minds, and frame your message to influence others. We have live workshops every month, group coaching to unpack tough situations, and tons of easy-to-use scripts, strategies, and resources that you can apply right away without adding more to your plate. So come refuel with a community that gets you and wants to help you speak your truth in a way that's heard. Join us at confidentcommunicator.com and click on community. That's confidentcommunicator.com. Lead yourself and others will follow.
As HR professionals, we're often asked to juggle strategy, compliance, and people leadership. But what does it look like when HR truly leads with vision? Today, we're joined by Bobby Audley. Bobby is a keynote speaker with his organization, the Audley Group, and he is a leadership trainer with M&T Bank. For almost 15 years, Bobby has helped organizations create positive energy and cultures of connection. Bobby has spoken in 40 states, delivered in 2 TEDx talks, and worked with elite athletic programs in Fortune 500 companies. He also is passionate about teaching leadership to young people, serving as a partner and co-director of Timber Lake West, a premier sleepaway summer camp in New York's Catskill Mountains, before starting Have a Ball Sports for Kids. Bobby's passion lies in helping HR professionals see beyond processes and systems to lead with meaning, influence, and strategic impact. We're honored to have him here on the Beyond HR podcast today, so welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for that introduction.
Yep. And then what we like to do typically in every episode as best as we can, sometimes we get a little derailed, but we want to start with our core question, which is, who is Bobby at his core and what drives Bobby with passion for the work that he does?
That's a great question. I feel like who I am at my core, I could have a lot of different answers for it. You know, I even think of I will say this, a lot of where I'm currently at in life and my answers are going to be driven by the fact that I have 2 kids now. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old, and that has guided so much over the last 4 years as becoming a dad became a part of this conversation. And the through line for me from very early on is this is not just kind of really branding, but the answer is as a connector. And that has just been very consistent for me early in my life, early in my career. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted my work to be really seamless with my life, just because that's important to me, that what I'm doing, I actually care about. And as I look through it and what I'm doing now, you know, connecting communities, connecting teams, connecting people, being connected has always been extremely important to me. And especially now as a dad and having a family, you know, that community piece is so important to us. So that's my answer. And I give that explanation. So it just doesn't sound like I'm giving some crafted answer as far as I'm a connector and we're only talking about work. It sincerely is what drives me, what's important to me. And just naturally what I love to do is to connect people and to be a part of a community.
Yeah, in essence, you're connecting to the human experience at the core 100%. Of it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And being a parent myself, I mean, you talked about that, and that always resonates as parents.
Yep.
I also have a 4 and a 7-year-old, which is wild to say at this point. My 4-year-old just turned 4. Yeah. So it was hard to actually remember she's also 4 right now.
My daughter, so October 30th, she turned 3.
Oh,
she's got the Halloween
October birthday. That's great. We have an October and then we have a November 1st. So that's great. Yeah.
All right.
So So tell us a little bit about what your path has looked like, even parenthood, if you want to share that, because I feel like that is something we don't talk about very often, right? We're just like work, work, work all day long. And it's that song, work, work, work all day long. But what were some of the turning points or like pivotal experiences that shaped your approach?
Yeah, I mean, parenthood definitely is a turning point, and I'll get to it because it's the more recent one. When I was in college, I was originally going to study business because I don't know, wanted to work for business. I had no idea. And I always had this kind of desire to start my own business, but I didn't know what that looked like. And dead serious, I went to sign up for classes, and there were a lot of math classes required for that. And so I thought, that's not happening. What's the next thing I can do that I'm interested in that would not require as many math courses? And so I studied political science and history because I was interested in it. And not to go all the way back to college, but it's relevant for me because I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I've always been interested in leadership development, personal development, the self-help section of the bookstore. So I think there's a lot of folks that look at what I'm doing now, people that I grew up with that'll say, well, we always knew you were going to do that. I didn't know I was going to be doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And too often we look at people's LinkedIn profile and we assume that their path was intentional when it's often not. We are just figuring this out as we go. So didn't know what I wanted to do. Went to a leadership retreat when I was a senior in college, and it was amazing. And it was led by a guy at the front of the room. And so I went up to him afterward and I asked him, I was like, is this your job? And he said, yes. And he was my first mentor into that world. When I graduated from college, I started a business running leadership trainings and retreats for college students. I was 22, 23. And you know, there is in the college market space for that. It wasn't, it was a little bit bold. And at the same time, there is space for that where recent college graduates are even running these departments at universities. And that was part of my story too, is I ran a free workshop at a local college because I was just reaching out to high schools, colleges, anywhere I could, offering free workshops, keynotes, whatever it might be. And one of the local colleges near me, I think, kind of saw through the veil. And they're like, well, you're doing this for free. What are you doing to make money? And I said, just a bunch of odd jobs. And so they hired me in a part-time role to run their student leadership department as well as their new student orientation. And I loved it. And it was complemented by running my business on the side. That job then got promoted to full-time after a couple of years. And that's not what I wanted to do. I did not want to, work through student life in higher education. I wanted to be a leadership speaker, a trainer. I didn't, at that time, I think I called myself a youth motivational speaker because I didn't know how else to categorize it. And so I ended up quitting that job. I was dating now my wife. She had a full-time job with benefits. I was under 26 on my parents' benefits, all of that I share because people will say, wow, how did you get the courage to quit your job? And it's like, I had a really good safety net. And so, quit my job, started, kind of went full into my business. And, it's taken on a lot of different forms in the process, so that was a turning point there in terms of quitting my job and just feeling the weight of that. Yes, I had safety nets and there was a sense of, I have to get this done. I have to do this thing I set out to do. And then part of that was not just the business and sales side of things, but it was getting better as a facilitator. And so I became very focused. A second turning point was I was really intentional about trying to find another mentor. That first mentor kind of was my intro into the college market. I wanted a mentor who would introduce me to what I would consider fully immersive training. So not keynotes, not a 2-hour workshop, but a 2-day training experience. And I found one in Ryan Pinot, who was running the Pinot training group based out of Michigan. And he and I, after traveling together a little bit, I went through his training. He runs a training called Heart of a Leader. I joined his organization. And my mission was he was doing professional work in the corporate space. So that exposed me to that. And then my mission was to take it to athletics just because I wanted to. So I started reaching out to Power 5 athletic conferences and sports teams, that were looking for this type of team development training. What I recognized was the training itself was phenomenal for personal leadership development. And when you're doing something like that for 2 days with a group of people, I was seeing a group of strangers that were just open enrollment coming from different organizations, walking away as a solid group and team and unit that would stay together for years to come. And I thought to myself, well, what if we did this with a team whose goal is to compete together this season? And so that worked, and it was awesome, and it was a lot of fun. And that led me to, I got married in 2017, and that also coincided with my busiest year as a speaker, trainer, coach. And the best way I can explain it is from August 1st until Thanksgiving of that year, I was home for 4 days. And that not only was not sustainable, I didn't want it to be sustainable. I definitely have colleagues, there's folks out there, you might have had them on your podcast, that are doing 150 dates a year on my side, on that side of the desk, and they love it. It wasn't for me. And so I was very challenged because I hit where I wanted to go as a business professional. I'd gotten a lot better as a trainer working with the Pinot Training Group. I was doing this work at that time. It was the college market plus sports plus professional. And I didn't see a path where I could slow down and become a dad and be a present husband. And so that's when I started exploring this world on the side of the desk I'm at now with M&T of potentially, is there a way I can do this within a larger organization where I still get to do the work? I'm not hustling as much from a sales perspective, and there's a little bit more, work-life balance. You go through all the entrepreneur podcasts and they'll tell you, there's no such thing as balance. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe in that world there's not, but there can be. And so that was the last turning point, was wanting to be a dad and get married and have that balance. And listen, I'll say it throughout the podcast. I have colleagues that are doing it, and I'm not saying they're bad parents because they're traveling that much. It just wasn't for me. That's it. And so then, just recently I was lucky enough, M&T Bank had been a client of mine where I would go in and offer workshops. And I did 50 cups of coffee programming with them. They really did a great job of making it work within their bank culture, and still do. And so I joined a team that I was very familiar with, and am doing work that I'm really passionate about, and still getting to do keynotes and working with sports teams that isn't a conflict of interest. So that's a long answer, but those are kind of the three major turning points for me: are starting the business, finding a mentor in the Pinot Training Group, and then right up until today, having kids is wanting to have kids and having kids is what led me to what I'm doing now.
That's awesome. How would you kind of define visionary HR leadership?
When I think of the idea of visionary, it's kind of looking forward. And for me, the organizations that I think from an HR perspective are looking forward and seeing what is the role that we play within an organization, what best value can we create. I think it's looking at our employees genuinely as our human resources. That's the idea. Too often, and I'm guilty of this before I really got involved in HR, of seeing HR as kind of the required things to get done, the HR required trainings that you have to take every year. People outside of large organizations think of it as like talent recruitment and maybe firing individuals. And that'll get taken care of. That's done, right? Can we be visionary in doing that better? Absolutely. And when we think of visionary kind of HR, it's organizations that are saying, how can we intentionally develop these individuals in ways that might not essentially align with exactly what we do? Where I'm at now at M&T Bank, it's prior to this job, I can't remember the last time I was in a bank. Like, I'm not a banker. I don't have finance background. I come at it from a place of, I seek to develop individuals so that they can thrive in the role that they have, specifically with leadership development. I often say I work with a lot of people that are promoted because they're great at what they do. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you're tasked with being a manager, and you might not have those skills inherently. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe there's any 10 skills. If you just implement these, all of a sudden you'll be a great manager. What I believe and what we practice in my current role is, how can you have dials to your personality, to your leadership abilities, to the skills you can bring, and how can you turn those dials when they're needed? If you need to sit down and just let one of your employees vent and get some things off your chest, and you have the ability to do that. If you need to be a coach in that moment, you have the ability to do that. If you need to lead and just say, this is what we're doing, this is where we need to go, you can do that in a way where your team trusts you. And I see organizations where HR leads that effort. HR is the one that is sponsoring the leadership training, that is putting together a leadership training team to ensure that all levels of their organization have this and they are developed to their fullest potential. And I don't know, I think maybe within HR, people sometimes see that, but I think a lot of organizations don't see that under the umbrella of HR. And the ones that do, they thrive, they move forward, they have higher retention rates. You see it all the time. When I would work with them as an outside consultant, it's when I would ask people, how long have you been here? And everyone's been at that organization for 10, 20, 30 years. And you learn it's because they have, intentional development programs within their organization that come from HR, because I don't know where else they would come from unless that company made their own learning and development department. But usually that's not the case. But everyone has an HR department, and how can we utilize that department to develop people fully?
Yeah. I feel like we need to change like the title of our department as a whole. There for a while we were like personnel, and then we turned into HR, and now I hear the word people. And I'm like, what is it that we truly do, right? And one of the questions I was going to ask you, how do you measure like a real sense of impact, right, in HR beyond the typical metrics that people want to hear about? And you kind of answered that question of your retention rates do show it based on your asking folks, right? Hey, why do you stay here? Like they call them stay interviews, right? So I feel like there just needs to be a different title to be able to say and have a different perspective on HR.
And it's funny because I think organizations have played with these titles, which has made job searching very difficult for all of us, because you'll see
you don't know what we're looking
the amount
for.
of times I'd say like in 2017, 2018, when I decided, I think like a job, right, would be a better path forward for me than just running my own business solely. I started exploring with not knowing anything. And the amount of times I would see like director of people and culture, and I would think, wow, like that's perfect. I can do that. And then I realized it's just I shouldn't say just, but it's an HR director role, which at that time and even now, like I am not perfect for. Yeah. That is not, I'm not qualified for. However, I was looking at that and thinking based on the title, what it might be. And I love the title. I get it, to your point. And it is an interesting transition of what is it exactly that we do, and how do we kind of fit it under these umbrellas, and what does it mean? And in the end of the day, I think you asked about the metrics, and it is for me retention, and it also is kind of just with even a large organization, you can get a sense of if people are proud to work there or not. And while that might seem like a very kind of esoteric metric, if you are the director of human resources or whatever the department's called, I think you can go off of that a little bit of like, yes, use your numbers, get your scores, do your surveys, and overall get the pulse of your organization. Are people proud to work here or not? Are they happy to be here? Or is it just something where it's just a job for them? And that's where small businesses really have a good pulse on that. And large organizations, it's a little bit harder. And I also think it can be done. We just, have to kind of know how to look for it.
Yeah. I think for me too, like I would even challenge a little bit the retention metric too, especially in today's climate of, instability and insecurity, because even a lot of times, like when you ask people, why are you here? Why are you still working here? You've been here for 15 years. Oh my God. If the reason why they're here is because they need a paycheck, that might not be the right metric to look at, because if you're trying to build a culture of belonging and be able to feel like there's a purpose behind what you're doing, more so than obviously we have to pay our bills and do our things, but more so something to feel like you're part of a bigger vision and goal. Even sometimes just looking strictly at retention and turnover may not necessarily be 100% on point. It might be a little skewed.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think, and there's even, you can even ask some of those questions in some of your surveys. I know organizations that do that. I know M&T Bank does that, where I don't know if it's quarterly or what the kind of cadence is, but they'll send out surveys simply saying, do you feel your opinion is valued on your team? Do you feel you belong at this organization? Do you feel that your manager supports you in your professional development growth? Which, to Will's point, could also mean you leave the organization if that's what your professional development growth calls for. Just leaving might not inherently mean you'd answer no to those questions. And I still believe we couple it with kind of just getting a general feeling sense of the place, because there is a questionable, how not honest are people with those answers, but how many of them just kind of click through and let it go. I think people are fairly honest, but I don't think that if we get back all great scores, we can just rest on our laurels and say, well, look at that, we got great scores.
Yeah. And how would you embed a deeper purpose in the everyday practices of the HR department of the organization and the decisions that are made to help drive that greater purpose, get our sense of belonging for employees and even for the HR person conducting them?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a culture change in a sense. Some organizations even might resist that too. So how would you kind of approach that as a whole?
It comes from leading by example. You can come up with a new mission vision statement. You can come up with here's our values, and it shows up on your computer background screen, or it's on your, the wall next to you. And that mission statement, those values either get defended or they get an eye roll. And I use those two terms very intentionally because that's what I see. When I work with an organization as a consultant, when I come in, I will often point at their values or bring them up. And I'll say, what do those mean to you? And you can either feel an eye roll or a silence, or people get defensive of like, why are you even asking us that?
Of course, we have a plastic. That's what it means.
That's right. Yeah.
Explain this to you.
Exactly. I find the difference comes from, are the leaders at the top living these values or not? Time and time again. I really haven't seen it any different, because if the folks, I have seen the opposite, where I come in, I do one of those 2-day trainings I was talking about, and afterward, like towards the end of it, there's almost a sense of disappointment. And when I kind of call that out, they'll say, I really wish our leader was in here. I really wish our manager was in here. I wish our CEO was in here, because here we are doing this great work, and I just don't know if they're going to live it. And part of why I joined M&T Bank is our chief learning officer, Rob Phillips. I told you enough about, for me, I was seeking a place where I could do the work I'm passionate about and I love, and really get to continue what I've been doing. And this shift was very much related to work-life balance and my kids and my family. And knowing him, he prioritizes family above else. Our chief learning officer, that is what is most important to him. And it's seen in his PTO days that he takes. It's seen in what he shares with us on meetings. We want people to be vulnerable and share themselves. Well, we have to be willing to do the same. And so that culture is felt when it's led from the folks at the top, and they're the ones embodying what they wish to see, because then it gives everyone else permission to do the same. If the head of HR or the chief learning officer, whoever it is doing those things, then of course I feel permission to do it. If they're not, if they're saying it but not doing it, folks are going to follow what you're doing, not what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like that unspoken precedent. I always go back to that. Years ago, I had someone who I saw was working crazy hours, really never took the PTO. And I thought, early on in my career, I'm like, is that normal? Am I supposed to do that? Oh, well, I guess I am. Let's go. And then guess what? I started to burn out, and I was so tired. And I said, I can't do this anymore. Time to move on. So it was kind of like, those are the types of things that go on in the back of your mind. So how have you kind of managed phases of burnout or doubt in particular?
Two different questions, and I will answer them both. Phases of burnout. I haven't managed it well over the years, and I have gotten much better. So when I was running my own business, it really is difficult to say no. People always think, well, if you are working too much, you run your own business, just slow down. And what I would say is, especially as a speaker trainer, you in January, February, March, when you're building your calendar, let's say I build 25 dates and feel good about that. Well, then a longtime client reaches out for a 26th date. And of course, I want to keep that relationship alive, and I enjoy working with them. So I'll say yes to it. And then a new client that I've really been trying to reach reaches out for a 27th date. And I don't want to miss that opportunity. Like, people don't like to hear no. So if you say no, like, even if it's unconscious, they're often not coming back. 15 years of working, with many different small businesses, I find that to be true. So when I was running my own business, how did I deal with burnout? Not well. Every year when I tried to slow down, it just continued to pick up. and you really just had to kind of will yourself to keep hitting the road and keep kind of getting these things done, which was difficult because I love what I do. And I felt really passionate about each group that I was working with. And so it was never like I was kind of, not wanting to be where I was. You just get tired. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true for a lot of people too. And so for me, COVID, as it was, listen, overall, for small businesses, for mine, I went from 35 dates to none in like 2 hours. I think it was like February 24th or whatever it was. That was horrible. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't come back. Like COVID was very difficult. And I'm not trying to glaze over it and say, well, it was a positive because of what I'm about to say. It was very difficult. It was a very scary time for many people. And coming out of it, it did allow me to pause and to pivot and to reposition and to start from scratch. And in starting from scratch, I have prioritized a work that doesn't burn me out. Seeking this role, I was very intentional. I had a lot of interviews, them doing their interviews for my part, but also me, just asking for the travel schedule, talking to members on the team. I'm very committed to, I don't want to work with a-holes, for lack of a better term. Like I want to work with nice people. And so I always ask, can I talk to who I'm going to be working with? And that is very much a part of my decision-making process. And so that, I think, is the only thing I can think of when it says managing burnout, is front loading it to say, when I'm saying yes to something, I don't want that to be something that burns me out down the road. Because when it comes, I got to do the job. Like, we can't, whether it's your job or your business, once it's on your calendar, I don't know how you manage that burnout. And so it comes from managing the calendar. And then self-doubt, I have tremendous imposter syndrome when I'm in most rooms. And when like I said, I started a motivational, I say it with a little bit of a tone like that because I don't consider myself a motivational speaker, but like I started that when I was 22. And at that time, I remember at that time thinking like, this is crazy. Like, who's going to hire me? And then people did. And so you just kind of go with it. And I think I did a good job. If I look back at, I have videos from those days. Nobody else can see them but me. But like I did okay.
You should share them out, reminisce,
Yeah, that's right. And so, I think I just always have been a believer in we all have that self-doubt. And I think I do believe that those that accomplish great things simply don't listen to it. I don't know how many people are actually genuinely believing they belong where they are. I haven't really encountered many of them, even at the highest levels. And that's been consistent. So even when I started working with sports teams, I had an ability to be a fly on the wall for the Baltimore Ravens rookie camp. And I thought I wasn't even doing anything. The player development director, who had become a mentor, invited me to just see what they do and to learn. And even that, I felt like, why I don't belong in this room. And I get there and I see a bunch of rookie players who feel like they don't belong in the room. And then from there, I actually did have a chance to work with a team representing Team USA. It was synchronized figure skating. I didn't even know that was a thing. Yeah. Talk about like self-doubt going into that room. And I'm looking at their jackets and the room and everything, thinking I don't belong there. And then one of them finally spoke up about that during our day-long training. They said, one of the things I'm really dealing with is like, I just look at the talent in this room and where these athletes are from and what they've done. And she's like, I don't think I belong here. And so I hesitated on if I should acknowledge this or not, but I did. I was like, listen, I don't belong here. Like I'm the guy leading the training. And so I think, even coming into this role that I'm in now, I certainly am aware that I bring a lot of experience training and being in the front of the room, and I don't come with any stage fright. And when we talk about, emotional intelligence, I've done it for over 10 years. And my team is filled with folks that have worked in banking for many years, many of them at M&T Bank for many years, many of them, some of them in this exact role for 2 decades. Wow. And so I come in and think, like, why am I at the front of the room right now and you're in the back observing me? We should flip it because you've been doing this for 2 decades. And So I don't know. My answer is simply sharing examples, but
Yeah, no,
I don't
that's
have like a
perfect.
magic pill other than recognizing that all of us have that. And so the only ones that push past it are the ones that push past it.
Yeah.
What would you say is the first step that you took or someone could take towards that change and pushing past that overall essence?
There was a book, I wish I could quote it, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I'm quite confident that's the title. I forget who the author is. And it's, 120 page, 130 page book. And you get the concept just by me telling you the title. Yeah. They tell stories in it, and that's it. It was based in psychology, saying, the first step is taking the first step. I've done, a lot of different activities in workshops such as board breaking, where you're breaking, a wooden board, or I've worked on ropes courses where there's a leap of faith activity where you're jumping off of a pole, and then, you're harnessed in, but there's still a fear there. And why those activities are effective is because it mirrors life. What action do you need to take to push past your fear of this board in front of you? You need to break the board. You need to jump off the high ledge. In work, what action do you need to take to get over your fear of wanting a promotion? Is you need to ask for a promotion. That doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you need to ask for it. Mm-hmm. My wife just she's a mental health therapist, and she is leaving her private practice that she works for at the end of the year, and she's going to start her own firm. Mm-hmm. And she came up with a fee structure that she felt really comfortable with, and it mirrors colleagues that she knows. She was intentional about how she put it together. And then the first email she gets from a potential client saying, "What's your fee?" She looks at me and she goes, "Is this too much? I don't know. I'm not comfortable with it." And I said, "I've been there. Like, once it comes to asking for it, we're so afraid of rejection, or we're afraid that we're being too bombastic or arrogant or confident." And I said, if you feel good about it, like you've done the research, this doesn't come out of nowhere, ask for it. And she did, and she got it. And so, that is my answer. And it's not just mine. I've tried to find a better answer, because it's literally the work that I'm in, and people want an easier way to do it. But the truth is, you just put yourself out there. You just step up. You just try the thing. And you might fail, and it might not work. But if you're in a healthy environment that wants to see you thrive, you'll get a second chance. You'll get feedback. You'll get opportunities for growth because you tried it.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, we want to give a special thank you to two of our sponsors. First, we'd like to once again thank our launch sponsor, the Bring Disc to Life community at confidentcommunicator.com, for their generous support. We also want to thank one of our founding supporter sponsors, Chain Solutions. They have believed in the Beyond HR podcast since day one, and we are proud to have them alongside us. Chain Solutions has been a trusted name in background screening for just over 20 years. They are accredited, use secure mobile-first technology, and offer incredible responsive support with an average response time of just 18 minutes. If you're in need of a background screening partner who gets it right, fast and secure, Chain Solutions is one to know. And just for our listeners, they are waiving their usual $250 setup fee. Just mention you heard about them on the Beyond HR podcast. Thanks again to Chain Solutions for being a part of our journey.
If someone, even like an HR professional or a leader, maybe feels stuck or undervalued in what they're doing, what would you suggest to them as another first step towards that change? I know you were talking about taking that leap of faith, essentially, but what would you say? Have you ever felt that? Have you ever seen anybody like that, especially HR?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I think, feeling stuck is maybe one of the most common reasons that folks will seek out, career coaching or life coaching or leadership coaching, even leadership coaching. People reach out thinking, I need, skills to be a better manager. And I think that's often true. But I also think sometimes they reach out, it's not at the beginning of their managerial career. It's maybe halfway through when they feel stuck with what's my next step? Where am I going after this? And so that's a very common thing folks hear. And, I think number one, seeking help is the number one thing to do when you're feeling stuck, whether that's reaching out to a coach, life coach, leadership coach, executive coach. There's a lot of different kind of folks in the field and out there that's their literal, what they've spent their life doing is helping people feel unstuck. And number two is, letting people on your team know, having a trusted, maybe it's your manager. If you're lucky enough that you have that relationship with your manager and they simply want to see you succeed, there's a lot of managers out there like that would literally help you get your next job, even if it's off their team or outside of the company, because they're great at that. That's what they do. I'm not naive enough to think they're all like that. If you're listening to this thinking, where the heck does this guy live? And so like, I know there's managers that wouldn't do that. And so then the next step would be seeking a colleague or a friend outside of your organization. And that's what I've done. So I've done both the things I've suggested. I have twice worked with coaches at times where I felt stuck. When I first quit my job, I felt stuck in terms of building my business, not because I didn't know how to sell, but because there's so many directions I could have gone. And I didn't know which direction to take. Too often we think entrepreneurs have this flash in the pan moment of this is what I'm supposed to do and who I'm supposed to serve. I didn't have that. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know any step after that. And so I sought out a coach to help me through that, and they were incredibly valuable. And then most recently, when I decided that I was interested in seeking a job where I got to do this work, I sought out a friend who's in a completely different industry and line of work, but he's worked in corporate America his entire life. That's all he knows. He was laughing at the things that I would ask him about, like, what does PTO stand for? I told him I now have to book travel through Concur. And he's like, well, everybody does. And I'm like, I've never heard of this thing. And so like all these little things that I felt stuck in seeking that role. Like when I looked at my resume, I thought to myself, I don't know how people are going to view this. And so he was extremely helpful, just his perspective and vantage point. He knows nothing about HR, nothing about my career, but he was helpful in that place. And so I've always found it, just sharing, being vulnerable, reaching out to folks, whether you're paying a coach or you're talking to a friend or a family member, is hugely helpful. And then I am a huge proponent of, the internet is an incredible place right now. There's podcasts, there's audiobooks, there's so much out there on this type of stuff. And so if you're feeling stuck, find a resource that can also help you with that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So it doesn't even have to be from this conversation today, but if listeners could take away one powerful insight from you, something that could inspire them to live or even work with more purpose, what would it be?
It's genuinely make connection a priority. If, it hasn't been really a direct theme of the conversation, but it is. If you think of, my answer of either finding a coach or a friend, or stop putting people on a pedestal and understand that your boss, the athletes you watch on the Sunday football, all have imposter syndrome and aren't sure where they're going, or some of them feel stuck. And I genuinely have met with professional athletes who say they don't really love their sport, but I guess they'll say like, I'm good enough at it where I get paid a lot. It's like they're in a job no different than we are. And some of us in jobs that we just hate, it's hard for us to think that. You're telling me this person who gets paid millions of dollars to play a sport doesn't like it. And I'm telling you, it's true for a lot of them. And so my theme really is make connection a priority, reach out to people, grab coffee, go for a walk, get a dinner, and have a conversation that isn't just focused on work and growth and climbing the ladder. It's sincerely getting to know people on a personal, honest level, because then when you have those work conversations, they're meaningful and they matter. I was almost hesitant when and again, I knew the folks at M&T Bank. I had done training for them, interviewed for this role. And in the interview, the common question was, why are you interested in this transition? And I was hesitant to be as honest as I am about it's a family choice for me, because to me that can sound like, I'm not really committed to this role, which isn't true. It's just the truth of I got 2 kids now and this is a better situation for me. And mentors of mine were like, of course you be honest about that. And even now being on the team, I tell everybody, anytime I have a one-on-one meeting and we talk about this transition of my life, it is so focused on family. And that doesn't mean I'm not committed to the role and doing a great job and doing everything I can and picking up extra dates on the road when it's required by our team. Of course we do that. And family is right there at number 1. So all of that for me has come from just connecting with people on a genuine level. That doesn't mean that I expect you to have friendships at work, or you're telling people at work your deepest, darkest secrets, or it's none of that. I'm not expecting that. I'm simply saying, let people in a little bit and have an interest in them too. Be curious about their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember even what made me reach out to you in particular. So I went to the Frederick County SHRM conference, and you were their keynote opening speaker, and you talked about connection and vulnerability and made people stand up in the room. And I don't know what came over me, because typically I wouldn't be the one to really raise my hand and say, oh, I want to tell you what I think. But I stood up in the room and I said, oh, I'm here on behalf of Cumberland Valley SHRM. We like to support Frederick County SHRM whenever we can, and we were talking about, tell me one thing that you and your partner, I think we were talking about, have in common. And we had in common that we both had chickens. So it's just funny what you find through a little bit of vulnerability and connection. And I still remember you making us touch knees. That was odd for me. But
in a room full of HR
in
professionals.
A room full of HR
Let's
professionals.
not say make you. I think I gave the option to.
You did. But it was kind of like that, we better do this. We're going to be rule followers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's HR folks. But I'm telling you, it was a powerful moment, and I learned more about that person. Can I remember their name? No, but I remember a lot about them. And just taking that time to connect with folks, I think, can really make the difference, like you said.
I've seen some amazing conversations come from that activity. And, for your listeners, it's quite simple. When I open a keynote, you find someone you've never, which already out the gate, like you're sitting at your tables thinking this is just a normal keynote. And I don't think what we're doing is that crazy, but like I'll say, have everyone stand up. You're going to find someone you've never met before. You don't know who they are. You haven't connected, or you just don't know very well. You find that person, you sit down, and I will say, I encourage you to touch knees. And yeah, I'm sure there's a little social pressure to actually do it. I do believe I usually will make the joke of, I know this is HR, and some people make it for me. But, I encourage you to touch knees if you're able, if you're open to it. And because there is something to physical touch. And there's been the most popular study was done in the NBA of teams that are fist bumping, high-fiving, slapping each other on the back, have a deeper connection, stronger team, more trust. And there is science behind that. That doesn't mean I'm saying you should be hugging all of your colleagues. It's simply saying there is something to physical touch when it comes to connection. And so usually whether you're touching toes, something, just be close to each other. And then you share your life story. You get, Paige would have 3 minutes to share your life story, and Will just listens, doesn't interrupt. And, and then you switch. And I do remember now, I didn't put those dots together before the podcast, but now when you're talking about the chickens, I do remember you sharing that. Because those are my favorite connections. When I often say, when you have 3 minutes to share your story without being interrupted, what often happens is you tell your whole, story as you think it is. And then you're like, I got nothing. And Will stares back at you, just smiling. And then you're like, I got chickens. Like, I don't know, or like the thing that you think is maybe irrelevant. And that is time and time again what people connect on is that they've got dogs, they've got chickens, that they love the beach, that they have, whatever it might be. Those are the things that we then see ourselves in the other person, that we then see, them beyond their role and beyond their LinkedIn profile. And that's the only goal for me. I always say, because I don't necessarily think you need to be friends. I'm not that kind of team building guy. It's not about that. It's seeing people beyond their role, their title, their LinkedIn profile, whatever it might be. And those little things really, really do go a long way. And it's what we remember. I worked with a group one time where there was two folks that shared an office together. Like they were kind of literally in the same cubicle or area or whatever it might be. And they ended up doing this because they were like, I really don't know you. And they found out that they went to the same high school together growing up. And they never knew that. They never had that little bit of a conversation. And anytime I tell that story, the room will be like, oh. And it's like, come on, how many of you could see yourself in the same boat? There's someone on your team that you actually, you have no idea where they went to school or what they did. And so it's just acknowledging that we have to be intentional to learn those things, because it's not just going to happen organically most of the time.
So true. So true. Where can listeners connect with you?
LinkedIn's a great place. I know I've kind of said the LinkedIn profile a lot here, but
There we go.
it's a great place. If you look at my career path, don't assume it's all been intentional. And
Hey, that sounds like, by the way, that sounds like
name.
a title. That sounds like a title for a book. If you look at my career path,
It might be. That's a good.
Oh.
But yeah, so I'm sorry, I spoke halfway.
And then my website is bobbyaudley.com. And if you do happen to find me on Instagram, I also run sports classes for kids. So
That's so cool.
What I call confidently walking to 5 years old. So if you find me on Instagram and you're like, this looks like the same guy, but this is not the same work, my Instagram is pretty much just the sports classes for kids called Have a Ball.
It's kind of the same type of work, though, if you think about it.
I mean,
You're developing people.
And not only that, in terms of engaging a crowd and getting a group of, so the classes I run, the kids, it's parent and kid classes, and they are, you can bring your whole under 5 family. So if you have 3 kids, 5, 3, and 1, bring them all. And so then I do a warm up and some stretches, and then we'll do like a skill building activity. And you got to get the group, right? You got to bring them in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You got to get them around the circle.
Yep.
You got to get them stretching, repeating after you. And so it is funny. I just yesterday was in New Jersey with M&T Bank doing a full day training with small business, like middle managers and small businesses that are emerging leaders. And tomorrow I'll be doing a sports class. And it does feel very similar.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just miniature people.
Yes, miniature.
That's right.
people.
Right.
Very cool. And then do you have any current projects and initiatives that you're currently working on that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Honestly, I just started working with M&T Bank in July, and we sit under HR, which I think, again, is a big, informs my kind of view of where this field can go and how they should operate, because I think what we're doing is awesome. And 2 projects that I'm a part of in this role. We have our Next Up Leadership Development Program, which is the one I just spoke about, where we have emerging business leaders that are business banking clients of M&T Bank, and they can come through this program. And we have some internal M&T folks that are part of it too. And like I said, it's that idea of you're promoted because you're great at what you do. Some of them are literally, one guy's an electrician, and now he manages a team of 6 people, and he's like, oh, what am I supposed to do here? And so, they're getting that training in how to be leaders. And then we have a program called Executive Leadership Development, which is the CEOs and owners of those companies doing the same thing. And so those are 2 projects that, maybe not as relevant if you're an M&T Bank client. I guess reach out to your relationship manager and see if that's something you can be a part of. But that's really what I'm focused on now. And like I said, still doing the SHRM keynote here and there if I'm able, and then focused on that.
Very cool. Very cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. I know somebody is going to take something out of this. We talked about a lot of really great things. Even if they just even if they gain just hey, touch knees together and connect with a person.
Time and again, that's what people remember, even after a full keynote or a full day, which I'm totally fine with. But yes, that is a great activity, and kind of spurred the 50 Cups of Coffee Challenge, the whole 9 yards. But thank you, Paige and Will, for having me on. This was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah. Take care, man. Thank you much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond HR podcast. We hope today's episode inspired you to reflect and grow in your own HR journey. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Beyond HR Podcast. If you found value here, share it with your fellow HR professionals. Until next time, keep making an impact on yourself.